Toys sold in the EU must be CE marked, and in this video I will explain how this can actually be done in practice. Now we use the Compliance Gate platform as the starting point. So let's say that I'm intending to sell this plush toy right here. The first thing I need to do is to map out I have to identify the directives or regulations that in turn set CE marking requirements for toys. And as such, I need to create a requirements list. Now in this case I will keep it very simple. I will just declare that this is a toy product, and a toy in the EU at least is a product with play value from newborns up to 14-year-olds. That's the basic definition. You can of course go deeper, but that's a fundamental thing to understand anyway. Right, so it's a toy and we'll keep it simple. So I'm not going to combine this with other modules, but if this would be, say, an electronic toy, then you would need to comply with regulations and directives that concern electronics, but we have other videos on that topic. Right, so I don't think any of these parameters are really relevant, so let's get straight to it. So, what I'm dealing with here is the Toy Safety Directive. The Toy Safety Directive essentially requires that all toys are safe and correctly labeled, documented and so on. And it is under the Toy Safety Directive that you will find the CE mark. Now in this specific case, at least when it comes to toys, the CE mark indicates compliance with the entirety of the Toy Safety Directive. Now, as I'm sure you also understand, affixing a CE mark to a toy doesn't magically make the toy safe and compliant. There's a lot of steps I need to take before I can actually affix the CE mark. Okay? And that's exactly what I plan to explain. Now, we have established that we need to comply with the Toy Safety Directive. What's the next step? We need to look for harmonized standards. So harmonized standard is essentially a standard that, if I comply with it, I comply with the requirements of the Toy Safety Directive, meaning that I can sell the toy in the EU. And if my product does not comply with at least the one harmonized standard or the harmonized standards that are applicable to the product, then I cannot sell it. Okay, so that's really the core of everything. When it comes to the Toy Safety Directive, it's primarily EN71, or the different parts of EN71 that I must be concerned with. And as you can see here, we have EN71-1, and this one concerns mechanical and physical properties. What does that mean? Well, it covers small parts, sharp points, and so on and so forth. It's an extensive document that lists different requirements that I must physically implement into my product, or I cannot sell it. Okay, so that's really something that, regardless of the type of product, you need to look at EN71-1. And this should be done at a very, very early stage, because this is going to impact the design of your product. It may, after you have looked at EN71-1, become clear that your, say, current technical drawings are inherently non-compliant. And in that case, you can never affix a CE mark because you cannot pass safety testing. Right, so that's where we begin. Point 2 is in 71-2, and that's, by the way, you've got different versions of part 1 here. But anyway, I will go straight to part 2. This concerns flammability of toys. It is not always being tested for, but it's one of those that it tends to be part of the testing procedure for most toys that I have been involved with anyway. That's flammability. Point 3, we have migration of certain elements. So this part sets restrictions, chemicals and heavy metals, for example lead, cadmium, mercury, phthalates and so on, like DHP. So toxic substances that are harmful, in particular for children. It's very important that, especially when you work with toy manufacturing and outsourced toy manufacturing, that you're very clear to your suppliers that materials must be phthalate free, heavy metals free, and you should be very, very clear that products will be tested according to EN71-3. Another way to comply with EN 71-3 is to make sure that you take complete control of material procurement. And this could be a scenario where you don't allow your supplier to decide which plastic to use. Instead, you maybe say we're going to use this granule from Formosa or DuPont or BASF or something like that, so that you can actually take control over material procurement and verify a source that is actually complying with EN 71-3, for example. Because it's not really about product design per se, it's about the substance content. And the more you can control material procurement, the more you can eliminate the risk of, let's say, selling products that contain high levels of phthalates and so on, which of course is illegal. And then beyond -3, there's a list of, let's say, more product-specific types of standards, experimental chemistry kits, chemical toys. What else do we have? Finger paints, activity toys, so on. For the most part, 1, 2, and 3 tend to be included in for most toy safety testing procedures. Okay, and here you can also see there's a standard for electronic toys. So this is really this is really the core, because at the very core of everything, you need to make sure that your product, your toy, is safely designed. So I need to get access to these standards, which I can do through Senelec.com. And then I need to go back to the drawing board. I need to make sure that my product is properly designed, that is designed to comply, that the seams are strong enough, that these plastics eyes cannot be easily pulled out, and I don't know, maybe I will have to remove this scarf or something. Maybe that could be a suffocation risk. I need to make sure that my product is safely designed. That's number one. That should take place at the drawing board. Then I need to move on. I need to issue a declaration of conformity. Let's see if I have one. No, I don't. So I need to explain this from the beginning. So declaration of conformity is, well, this is the template we have on the Toy Safety Directive, and you need identification of the toys. 2025. Okay, this is one way you can fill it in, but in short, you need identification, you need name and address of the manufacturer. The manufacturer in this case would be, if I design this toy and I go to a factory on Alibaba, then I'm still a manufacturer. Okay, so it doesn't mean that I have the production facility. It means that it's my brand or my design. Object of the declaration, this is for traceability. We would need a product name again. We would need a batch. I would start with a model number, a static model number. I would have a batch number, and upload an image. You also need to specify the directive that this complies with, and in this case it's quite straightforward because we have the Toy Safety Directive, right? So we begin with this, but it could be more. If it's an electronic toy, you may have to add more regulations and directives, but let's just keep it simple. Then we need to list the harmonized standards, and well, we have to go back to this list. We need to specify the exact version and the full title. And you would repeat this at least for EN 71-3 and likely EN 71-2 as well. If I have involved a notified body, which is necessary in some situations, then you also need to specify their details. A notified body is essentially a designated entity, an accredited entity that will review my documentation and basically certify everything for me. Almost like they provide, let's say, the final word, and that's necessary for CE marking of some products. Not always the case for toys, but there are scenarios when that's necessary. Right, beyond that, you need to sign it, name, function, signature, place and date of issue, and you need to store this for 10 years. Okay? Right, so what have we achieved so far? We have identified a list of harmonized standards. We have issued our declaration of conformity. Now we need to do what? Oh, we need to create technical documentation. For this we need to go into Annex 4. Now I have to go directly into Eurolex, to the Toy Safety Directive itself. And this is the Toy Safety Directive. This is what it looks like. First thing we do is to select the latest version. Right? And where do we have to go? We have to go to Annex 4. Let's find Annex 4. Yeah, there's a lot of text here. I have to move myself. Right, we go Annex 4, technical documentation. So the technical documentation is a complement to the DOC, you can say, but you need to have a detailed description of the product. You need a list of components and materials. You need a safety assessment. Description of the conformity assessment procedure followed, and that's basically whether you have self-certified a product as module A, and then there is another module. Let me see if you involve a notified body. Yeah, then you got module B and C. You need a copy of the declaration of conformity, address and place of manufacture and storage, copies of documents that were submitted to the manufacturer if you involve notified body, test reports, that's basically test reports corresponding to EN71, the parts. And again, if you have involved a notified body, you also need the EC type examination certificate. Okay? So just like the DOC, the technical documentation should generally be stored for 10 years. It's quite a long time. And if you have questions about safety assessments or some of these concepts, you can just write a comment. I'll do my best to get back to you. I know these concepts can still be a bit abstract, but in this video I'm giving you the, let's say, the express version of what this means. But in short, technical documentation is a set of PDF files. That's what it is. It's just like the declaration of conformity. It's a set of files that you store on a computer. That's what it is, and you send it when requested, basically. Market surveillance authority, or if it's part of the notified body procedure. Okay, now we created the technical documentation. Beyond that, you also need to create instructions and safety information. I'm not going to go into detail because that can mean very different things depending on the product. But precautions, instructions of use. That being said, it's very important to be aware of that. There's no warning label or safety instruction or anything like that that can actually take away from the basic principle that toys must be safe. You cannot decide not to comply with the harmonized standards and instead use instructions as a substitute. These are complementary. Just to be clear about that. Okay, you draw it up, you make sure your manufacturer prints them. That's really what you have to do. CE marking. Now we get to the CE mark. And as you can see, it's a lot of work before you even think about the CE mark itself. But the CE mark has to be placed on the product, the packaging, or accompanying documentation. The placement depends on the product type, if there's enough space and so on. Traceability information. Now this relates to the product name, batch number. It must be possible to trace the product to a certain order, a production run, the brand owner, the manufacturer for the most part, and contact point and address. So that way it's clear who sold this product, which model is it, which production run. That should be on the product or packaging. Actually, they're a bit cryptic. They say it should be affixed on the toy and when not possible, affixed on the packaging. Again, safe use and warnings can be applied as well when it is either required, as in your product is covered by a labeling requirement which explicitly mandates this, or when it's necessary, as a complement to the fact that the product is already designed to be as safe as it can be. And we're going to go back into, let me see here which part that is, but we're going to look at Annex, let me see which one this is now. Yes, under Annex 5 Part B, you can also find specific warning symbols and also indications of precautions for certain categories of toys. These are not all categories of toys that exist now or in the past or potentially in the future. So that means they cannot reasonably include every single precaution or warning symbol. But it's a starting point. You should definitely read through this section to see if there's something that applies to your product. Now first we have this symbol, which is usually red, I think. But anyway, toys not intended for use by children under 3 years or 36 months. Either a statement or this graphic. Okay, activity toys only for domestic use, and this seems to be the case for all activity toys. It's just not conditional. Functional toys to be used under direct supervision of an adult. Chemical toys, roller skates, aquatic toys, toys in food, imitation of protective masks and helmets, and so on. So these are quite specific, and these are not just guidelines, these are mandatory. You need to read this section. Okay? And finally, we need to arrange lab testing. We need to make sure that our product is tested according to the EN71 parts that apply to our products. And at this stage, we want to be really sure that we're not going to waste money. We're not going to send a product that's inherently non-compliant. There are really two ways when it comes to complying with harmonized standards. Either you do your homework and you basically read through EN71 -1, you do your best to make sure the product is designed to comply, and you implement those principles. Say you make sure that corners are not too sharp and so on, that small parts cannot be broken apart. You have to implement that into the technical drawing to comply. That's not going to happen by itself. Or you hope for the best. You just go ahead, you don't really look at this as you design the product. You select components, you select materials, you get a prototype made, and maybe you even go into production, and then you send samples for lab testing. But the risk is that it turns out that your product is designed in a way that it's simply inherently non-compliant, and there's nothing that can be done in that case, normally anyway. So how do we get testing done? Well, at least when it comes to our system, you fill out this form. You need to provide information. Okay, specify this is toy, age group. Maybe go a bit lower. Okay, and this is the information you need to provide. I mean, you can go deeper. You can say that we want testing according to EN71 1, 2, and 3. If you have already decided. Now, testing companies, they can also help you determine which parts of EN71 are necessary, and also other standards that are not part of the CE marking procedure. But yeah, this is information that you need to share. Right, so of course in reality this can take a little bit longer than, I don't know, the 10 minutes I spent this recording. But I hope I at least managed to convey a somewhat coherent procedure. You begin by looking at harmonized standards. You create the documentation, a declaration of conformity. You draw up the technical documentation. You create instructions and safety information. You get the product packaging CE marked. You make sure you have traceability information, a company name, batch number, product and model, and so on. as safety instructions. You read through that, was it Annex 5, and you determine if you need to affix any of those statements or symbols. Finally, the product must be tested, and the test report will then be included with the technical documentation. And that's really everything I have to say in this video. If you have questions, you can also go to compliancegate.com and you can book a consultation.